In a small diner in the heart of a city that never sleeps, a young single mother is humiliated in front of everyone by an arrogant customer. But at the height of the chaos, someone unexpected steps in to defend her, the heir to one of the most powerful families in town. This unlikely encounter between two opposite worlds marks the beginning of a story filled with judgment, secrets, and a love daring enough to defy everything and everyone. And this is just the first scene of an intense plot full of twists. Before diving deeper into this story with me, make sure to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss the next chapters. Oh, and drop a comment below telling me where you're watching from. I'd love to know how far this story is reaching. Olivia Brown worked as a waitress in a small diner in New York. A young single mother, she balanced the tray with the same firmness with which she carried her difficult life. Between cups of coffee and simple meals, there was also the dignity of someone who, despite the circumstances, never gave up. In that environment of yellow lights and the smell of fried food, Olivia was much more than an employee. She was the silent soul of the place. Then Victoria Harris entered the scene, her eyes marked by superiority. Wealthy, elitist, accustomed to being served with reverence, she did not hesitate to use her position to belittle. The words she threw at Olivia were not mere complaints. They were daggers wrapped in sarcasm. The social gap between the two was glaring, as if it were a spectacle for all to see. Olivia felt the humiliation weigh on her shoulders. The flush on her face revealed the pain of being judged not for her ability, but for her condition. Being poor and a single mother in Victoria's eyes seemed to be a reason for scorn. In every gesture of the client, there was a cruel reminder. For some, worth is not measured by effort but by appearances. In the middle of the tension, an unexpected voice broke the silence. James Anderson, the son of one of the city's most influential men, stepped in firmly. His words not only defended Olivia but also echoed through the diner as a challenge to Victoria's arrogance. It was as if, in an instant, the balance of power had shifted. The diner, once just a backdrop of daily routine, became the stage for a singular event. Workers stopped chewing, eyes turned, and the atmosphere held its breath. It was impossible to ignore that clash of worlds. On one side, Olivia's vulnerability. On the other, Victoria's power. And in between, James's courage. While Olivia tried to recover, she realized she had been seen in a different light. James's gaze carried no judgment but respect. For someone used to invisibility, that meant more than a gesture of defense. It was a silent acknowledgement of her dignity, and that detail did not go unnoticed. James, at the same time, seemed surprised by his own reaction. There had been no calculation or strategy in his words, only an impulse of justice. But at that moment, an invisible bond began to form between him and Olivia. A bond that could not be explained by logic, only by the intensity of the encounter. The episode ended with tension hanging in the air, as if something more was yet to happen. The diner would not be remembered just for its simple menu, but for the moment when two destinies crossed. And from that point on, nothing would ever be the same, for an unexpected meeting was already about to unfold. When James decided to confront Victoria in front of everyone, the atmosphere froze in suspense. The words that left his mouth were not just a defense, but a sharp cut through the mask of arrogance she displayed. The entire diner seemed to have stopped in time, as if even the sound of cups had gone silent. Everyone's attention was fixed on the young man who dared to challenge the elite with such firmness. Victoria, used to having the final word, felt the sting of exposure. Her expression, once confident, faltered for a moment. It was not common for her to be disarmed in public, much less by someone from her own social class. The discomfort in her eyes betrayed the fact that, for the first time, control of the scene was slipping away. Olivia, still behind the counter, felt her embarrassment deepen. Being at the center of a spectacle she had not chosen was a heavy burden to bear. Her natural instinct was to withdraw, to vanish, to avoid the stares. And yet she could not deny the strange sense of relief in seeing someone step forward to defend her. Her gratitude came quietly, almost imperceptibly. Olivia lifted her eyes to James and with a timid gesture let a small nod of thanks escape. There was no room for grand speeches in that moment, only a silent recognition. Between them, an invisible line of respect had been drawn, short yet firm. Meanwhile, the contrast between their lives began to emerge with striking clarity. James was the son of an empire built on wealth, influence, and power. Olivia, on the other hand, knew only the reality of daily battles where each small victory was vital. The clash between their two worlds was already planted, like a seed ready to sprout. In the diner, the workers who had witnessed the scene murmured among themselves. Some saw courage in James, others only recklessness. For Olivia, that did not matter. What truly surprised her was realizing that someone from that social sphere had chosen to see beyond appearances. That in itself was a rare event. James, as he left the diner after the confrontation, carried the scene in his mind. It was not just about defending someone, but about the impact that woman had left on him. In Olivia's eyes, he had found something absent from the halls of luxury. Truth without ornaments, strength without disguise. Life, with its usual irony, had just placed two opposite paths face to face. And even though neither would admit it at that moment, the bond was already formed. Chance had played its role to unite two vastly different realities, setting the stage for conflicts and revelations yet to come. Leaving the diner, Olivia returned to her small apartment in Brooklyn. The space was modest, with simple furniture and signs of wear, yet it carried the warmth of a home built through effort. In the living room, toys were scattered, and every corner reflected the daily struggles of a devoted mother. Here, her priority was always the same: Ethan, her 8-year-old son. Ethan Brown, full of energy and curiosity, ran to hug his mother the moment she walked in. His short curly hair and wide smile lit up the room, standing in contrast to the harshness of the outside world. He didn't need luxury. Olivia's love and care were enough to sustain his happiness. In that embrace, her entire purpose was defined. As Olivia carried out the evening routine, tidying the kitchen and preparing a simple meal, the memory of the confrontation lingered. James's gesture at the diner still echoed in her mind, but she refused to let fantasy overshadow reality. Her world demanded discipline, sacrifice, and constant vigilance to protect Ethan. Across the city, James returned to the luxurious Anderson mansion, a modern palace surrounded by flawless gardens and furniture that seemed to belong in an art gallery. Yet despite the brilliance, the atmosphere radiated rigidity. The walls reflected tradition, expectations, and unbreakable rules, a stark contrast to the modest warmth of Olivia's home. James's routine was marked by the weight of the Anderson name. Every gesture observed, every choice judged, every word measured. The luxury around him did not bring freedom, but invisible chains that bound him to a perfect image. For him, freedom felt more distant than it did for many who owned so little. While Olivia fought to maintain her independence and dignity in Brooklyn, James reflected on the woman he had met. The strength she displayed in facing adversity captivated his attention. It was as if in her presence he could see the fragility hidden behind his own privileges. Two worlds so different began to mirror each other in contrast. Olivia's silent battle for survival revealed a courage James had never known. And amid luxuries that failed to fill the emptiness, James began to realize that true wealth was not only in possessions but in the victories earned through small daily struggles. Fate, at that moment, was already aligning the pieces for these opposite universes to cross again. It would not be a matter of chance encounters but of choices that would test both of them. And so, without realizing it, every step they took in their separate routines was drawing them closer to an inevitable reunion. As Olivia tucked Ethan into bed, she allowed herself to sink into memories she rarely let surface. In her mind, she returned to the moments of abandonment, when the father of her child had left her alone, carrying not only the pregnancy, but also the weight of rejection. The recollections came like open scars, revealing how much life had tested her before she even turned 30. During long nights of work, she had learned to turn tears into strength. While others slept, Olivia counted coins, balanced bills, and thought of ways to put food on the table. Every sleepless night was proof of her resilience, and every early morning was confirmation that giving up had never been an option. These invisible wounds shaped her stance in the world. When she looked at Ethan, she found meaning in every battle. Her love for her son was the silent medicine that healed her pain. He was the reason she had the strength to face social disdain and financial hardship, as if every one of his smiles was a victory over the past. Meanwhile, James lived in a completely different universe. Accustomed to ease and privilege, he had never needed to fight for survival. What he possessed had not been earned through effort but inherited. Yet the encounter with Olivia began to crack open his perception, revealing the emptiness that abundance could not fill. James remembered Olivia's expression, her firmness in the face of humiliation, and her courage to move forward. It made him reconsider the privileges he had always accepted as natural. For the first time, he began to question the meaning of having so much without having achieved anything on his own. This thought unsettled him and at the same time began to transform him. Gradually, a silent connection was born between them, made of respect and admiration. There were no declarations or grand gestures, only a mutual awareness. Olivia recognized in James the rare willingness to see beyond appearances, and James found in her the strength missing from his own universe of rules and display. Olivia's wounds were deep, yet they had not defined her as a victim. Instead, they had made her a warrior. James's privileges, on the other hand, were a gilded prison that kept him from experiencing life in its essence. This contrast began to intertwine their paths, as if each carried what the other needed to learn. And so, amid painful memories and unexpected reflections, an invisible bond continued to form. Life seemed to whisper that both were being prepared for something greater, even if they did not yet know it. Each recollection and each question drew them closer to a future where their pains and discoveries would merge. Margaret Anderson was the first to notice the closeness between James and Olivia. To her, this was not just a mistake, but a direct threat to the reputation carefully built over generations. The Anderson name carried weight, power, and tradition, and in her eyes it could not be tarnished by someone who did not belong to that world. The discovery stirred unease in the halls of the mansion. Margaret, with her firm posture and calculating gaze, did not see Olivia as a woman of courage, but as a risk that had to be eliminated. Her discreet gestures, loaded with intent, revealed that she was willing to do anything to preserve the family's image. Olivia, on the other hand, sought no confrontation. To her, James was simply someone who had crossed her path at an improbable moment. But in the eyes of the elite, this simple bond was already enough to make her a target. Olivia's silence did not shield her from the invisible judgment that now surrounded her. James began to feel the first cracks within the empire to which he belonged. His support of Olivia, though discreet, echoed as a challenge to the rules imposed by his mother and his family. The weight of his surname was becoming a burden, a constant reminder that loyalty to family left no room for personal choices. In this context, Victoria Harris emerged, eager to assume her role as Olivia's declared rival. Victoria would not accept losing ground, especially not to someone she deemed inferior. With her striking elegance and arrogant gaze, she made no effort to hide her intention of winning James at any cost. To Victoria, Olivia was not just a romantic rival, but an intruder in a territory that did not belong to her. The sharp words she had once used in the diner now turned into calculated strategies, always backed by the influence of the elite. The battlefield was not physical but social, and she knew well how to wield its weapons. Olivia, even without realizing it, was already at the center of a silent war. On one side, Margaret's quiet judgment. On the other, Victoria's open rivalry. Caught between these forces, James was increasingly pressured, torn between the legacy he carried and the genuine connection he was beginning to feel. The Anderson name, once a symbol of prestige and power, became a chain. Every move James and Olivia made was observed, commented on, and interpreted. The weight of that surname extended far beyond the walls of the mansion, shaping narratives and decisions that would set the course for what was to come. The first consequences began to appear in Olivia's daily life. In the neighborhood where she lived, neighbors and acquaintances whispered as she walked by, spreading rumors fueled by curiosity and prejudice. The sensationalist press, always eager for stories of class clashes, began to follow her steps. The simple fact of being seen with James had turned into fuel for cruel gossip. Olivia felt the weight of those sharp tongues not only on herself but also on Ethan. The fear that her son would become the target of malicious comments grew with each passing day. Still, she kept her head high as she had always done, aware that her dignity lay in enduring. Yet inside her, the anguish grew like a silent storm. Meanwhile, on the other side of the city, the Anderson name was exploding in the headlines. Social columns speculated about James's unexpected closeness to a woman outside the elite circle. The scandal was beginning to take shape, bringing discomfort to his family who saw their public image under threat. The storm was not only about Olivia, but about the Andersons as well. The height of this tension took place at a lavish party of Manhattan's elite. Grand chandeliers, gowns, and impeccable suits set the scene where appearances mattered more than truth. Olivia, invited by James's insistence, stepped into the hall under judgmental stares. Her presence stood in stark contrast to the artificial glitter around her. Victoria Harris seized the occasion as a stage to reaffirm her superiority. Wearing a sophisticated dress and her arrogant gaze, she wasted no chance to ridicule Olivia publicly. Venomous comments spread among groups of guests, followed by muffled laughter. Humiliation seemed inevitable, until James intervened firmly. In front of everyone, James defended Olivia without hesitation. His words were direct, full of courage, and echoed through the hall like a challenge to the unspoken code of the elite. By taking Olivia's hand before them all, he made it clear he would not back down. The act not only exposed his determination, but also sparked an even greater scandal. For Olivia, that gesture was a mix of relief and fear. On the one hand, it proved James was willing to fight for her. On the other, she knew the consequences would be harsh. Society did not forgive such visible ruptures, and every act of James's defense only deepened the anger of those who felt challenged. In that luxurious hall, with bright lights shining and social masks slipping away, the world seemed to divide in two. On one side, the elite clinging to prejudice. On the other, a man willing to face everything for a woman deemed unworthy of his name. It was only the beginning of the storm that would spread far beyond the walls of that event. Olivia was beginning to realize that the weight of her relationship with James did not fall only on her, but also on Ethan. The fear that the boy might become a target of bullying or prejudice haunted her at every corner. In people's eyes, there was always judgment, as if her son were guilty of a choice he could not even understand. That concern ate away at her silently. Ethan, with his childlike innocence, did not grasp the cruelty of the comments. To him, his mother was the heroine who faced everything out of love. But Olivia knew the world could be merciless, and the thought of seeing her son suffer was unbearable. That dilemma placed her before the possibility of giving up her own happiness. James, on the other hand, was becoming more resolute. He not only defended Olivia before society, but also began to declare with firmness that he would do whatever it took to protect her. His words were not empty promises. They were backed by actions, such as his constant presence by her side, even in the face of hostility. The contrast between them grew sharper. Olivia thought of sacrifice as an act of love, willing to walk away if that meant keeping her son safe. James, however, saw love as a fight, believing that facing the storm was the only way to overcome prejudice. Two different visions, both moved by the power of feeling. With each passing day, the tension between love and renunciation deepened. Olivia, in silent nights, imagined what her life would be like without James, trying to convince herself she could endure the loneliness. But her heart resisted, and every memory of his gaze made the thought of letting go feel impossible. Still, the doubt remained. James, noticing her distance, only grew bolder. It was no longer just about standing by Olivia, but about confronting his own family and the values that had shaped him. It was as if in defending her, he was also defending himself from a hollow life. His love became at once an act of personal liberation. Amid the turmoil, Ethan showed surprising maturity. Even without understanding all the details, he sensed the sadness in his mother's eyes and the determination in James. His innocent affection and simple words were reminders that true love was greater than all the world's judgments and prejudices. Thus, the dilemma became inevitable: to follow the heart and endure sacrifice, or to let go in order to protect those one loves. The thread tying Olivia and James was stretched to its limit, ready to either break or prove its strength. And in that moment, every gesture seemed to decide not only their future, but Ethan's as well. The closeness between James and Olivia made increasingly clear the threat it represented to the Anderson family. Margaret, determined to preserve the family's tradition and reputation, decided to join forces with Victoria Harris. The two, though different in age and purpose, shared a common goal: to drive Olivia out of James's life. Victoria saw in Margaret the perfect ally. The matriarch's experience and coldness added to her own boundless ambition. Together, They began weaving silent strategies, manipulating information and exploiting weaknesses. It was not merely a plan against Olivia, but a true psychological war, executed with calculated precision. Meanwhile, rumors about Olivia's past began to circulate in twisted ways. Small details of her life were transformed into malicious stories, spread through the media and whispered in the halls of high society. With each fabricated report, her image was stained in the eyes of those who did not know her truth. Olivia felt the weight of these accusations as if stones were being hurled at her dignity. It was not enough to fight to support her son. Now she also had to face slanders that painted her as a threat. Her strength, however, was revealed in the way she refused to break, even when everything seemed to collapse around her. James watched it all with growing indignation. Seeing the woman he admired become the target of defamation stirred in him an even greater determination to protect her. It was not only about defending her publicly, but about confronting directly the forces that tried to manipulate him. This stance only deepened the conflict within his family. Ethan, in the midst of the chaos, began to show premature maturity. He noticed his mother's stifled tears and the heavy stares of the neighborhood. Through small gestures, long hugs, or words of encouragement, he showed that he understood more than he let on. His childlike courage became a beacon in the darkness. For Margaret and Victoria, every reaction from Olivia and James was closely observed. Like strategists in a silent game, they waited for the right moment to intensify their attacks. They wielded the power of influence, words and appearances as sharp weapons, confident that sooner or later they would achieve the final separation. The conspiracy was in motion, and distorted secrets spread like poison. Each new lie became a shadow hard to erase. And so, while Olivia fought to protect her son and her own truth, the web of intrigue tightened more and more around her and James. Robert Anderson, patriarch of the family, finally decided to intervene. With his rigid posture and voice loaded with authority, he made it clear to James that the time had come to choose: either remain faithful to the Anderson empire, with all its wealth and privileges, or abandon it all to stay by Olivia's side. The decision, though presented as a choice, sounded more like a sentence. James felt the weight of his name pressing heavily on his shoulders. The mansion's hall, lit by imposing chandeliers, became the stage for an emotional battle. Before his father, his figure seemed smaller, yet his conviction grew with every word. It was as if, for the first time, he was ready to break free from the invisible chains that had bound him. Olivia, even from a distance, could feel the impact of the confrontation. She knew James was facing one of the hardest decisions of his life, and that whatever the outcome, it would deeply affect her. In the silence of her small apartment, each heartbeat seemed to echo the uncertainty of that moment. Her fear was not losing James, but the price he would have to pay to choose her. Robert, firm in his speech, recalled the sacrifices that had built the family empire. To him, James had no right to risk it all for a relationship he deemed unworthy. His words were harsh, dripping with contempt, making it clear that Olivia would never be accepted into that circle. It was then that James raised his voice, stronger than ever before. He declared he would not give up Olivia nor Ethan, that his life could not be dictated solely by the burden of a surname. The silence that followed was deafening, as though even the mansion's walls awaited the outcome. For the first time, James met his father's gaze without lowering his head. Margaret watched the scene, her heart torn between shock and anger. To see her son defy her husband was unthinkable, yet James's determination left her speechless. In her eyes, there was a mixture of disbelief and loss of control, as if the carefully built empire was beginning to crumble right before her. Victoria, meanwhile, observed from a distance, unable to mask her frustration. The chance to win James was slipping away like smoke, and her expression revealed the fury of someone unaccustomed to losing. Her impeccable elegance could not hide the defeat that was beginning to etch itself across her face. In that intense confrontation, it was not only James and Olivia's relationship at stake, but the very values of the Anderson family. The clash of generations, of worldviews, and of priorities turned that moment into a defining one. The path James chose would not only redefine his own destiny, but also the legacy of an entire empire. The silence after the confrontation turned into a new beginning. James and Olivia could finally show publicly what they had long felt in silence. a love that had resisted judgment, lies, and threats. It was not merely a romantic union, but an act of courage in the face of a society determined to keep them apart. For Olivia, that victory did not taste like wealth. What she had gained was not a mansion nor a social standing, but something far greater: respect. The dignity of being seen not as an intruder, but as a strong woman who never stopped fighting for her truth. To her, that was worth more than any fortune. James, in turn, had freed himself from the weight of a surname. For the first time, he could breathe without feeling the pressure of legacy. Choosing Olivia and Ethan meant choosing himself as well. A future built on genuine love rather than imposed expectations. The burden of empire gave way to the lightness of an authentic life. Society, even reluctantly, could not ignore the gesture. The scandal that once placed them in headlines was now transforming into a symbol. The story of an Anderson who dared to break the rules echoed everywhere, inspiring some and unsettling others, but impossible to silence. Ethan walked alongside his mother and James with a smile that seemed to carry the outcome of the entire battle. His innocence, preserved despite everything, was proof that their love had triumphed not only for the couple but also for him. In the boy's gaze was the confidence of a brighter tomorrow. Margaret, though unwilling, no longer had the strength to contain her son's decision. Her distant gaze made clear that the empire would never be the same. The defeat was not in losing James, but in realizing that the power of tradition was not enough to control the human heart. Victoria, with her elegance wounded, withdrew from the stage carrying the bitterness of defeat. Her once haughty presence now seemed dimmed before the union that had endured everything. Her fall was not only social but deeply personal, marked by the inability to accept that one cannot always possess what one desires. And so, on the bustling streets of New York, among the noise of cars and the reflection of lights on the buildings, Olivia, James, and Ethan walked together, three destinies that, against all odds, had intertwined. Their image side by side was not only the end of a story, but the beginning of a new family. This story showed that neither wealth, nor a family name, nor society's judgment is stronger than the courage to truly love. In the end, what really wins is not power, but the decision to stand firm, even when everything seems to conspire against you. And now I want to hear from you. How far would you go for the love of your life? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget, hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell to keep following stories that inspire, move, and make you reflect.